All right, my fellow Halloween addicts. This month we're veering off the path a little bit, and we're going to be doing a Thanksgiving piece. And what is more Thanksgiving than a turkey? So with this piece, what I did is, you could use any kind of rectangle. This is a piece that I cut and have in my stash. But what I wanted to do is give it a unique background. So I had found this tissue paper that has printing on it. I think it's going to be replacing my text background tissue since that's no longer available. And this one is kind of a brown background with maroon paint printing on it. And I thought that would be perfect for a fall piece. And so what I did is I decoupaged some of that tissue paper onto this surface. And I let that dry. And then what I did is I took a emery board and sanded off the excess around the edges, so it gives me a nice clean edge. And then the next thing I did is put the pattern on. So what we're going to do next is some base coating. So I'm going to do the base coating and come back and point out what I base coated and what color I base coated it in. And that will be what you need to have finished before we start class in September. All right, so I have my base painting done. So I'll just go through and tell you what you need to have complete before you come to class. And this is going to be, his body is going to be based in sable brown. His wings, his neck, and his head are based in honey brown. This little base of his tail feathers is based with burnt orange. The tail feathers are fawn. The stripe on the tail feathers is Irish moss. The tips of the feathers are golden straw. His hat is based in graphite. You can go ahead and put the pattern on for his beak, his eyes, and his wattle. And of course the separation in the tail feathers and hat band and buckle. You want to paint his eyes with lamp black, his beak with golden straw, and his wattle with country red. And of course none of this has to be completely opaque. If you see some of the background tissue through it, that's great. That just gives a little bit more character to it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do some background shading. And we're going to do that with floats of burnt umber. So burnt umber is very well blended out. You don't want it to be real harsh. We're just going to float on the background above the feathers and around this edge. Oh, you don't have to worry about floating anywhere down here for this. This is just to get him off the background. So I'm just going to start here. And because this is tissue paper, it's going to look like you have a water line. But when that dries, that water line will go away. Unless you indeed do have a water line. But the tissue just gets wet. You don't want to get it too wet. You don't want it to come off. But just a regular float, you're going to see that little, what you consider a water line. So I'm just going to float up against this tail. Luckily, there's not a lot of background to cover. Which is good because I'm not having a really good time floating right now. You know, we all have those days. And of course it would be today. All right, and then we also want to go all the way around this edge. Which will be much easier than those curves. And you can see already the tissue's drying, so you're losing that water line that you thought you had. All right, already it's looking better. So what I want to do is I want to start on his tail feathers in the back. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush some highlighting with warm white. And we're going to dry brush some highlighting on the fawn colored parts of the tail with warm white. So wherever you can get in there and just dry brush a little warm white through the center of each tail. It's a little bright, but it'll be okay. And as long as we're dry brushing warm white, we're going to go ahead and dry brush warm white through the center of his beak also. As long as we have it on our brush. Oops, I got a little bit of red in there. Not good. For right now, but in a minute it'll be just fine. Alright, so as long as we have warm white on our brush, let's pick up a little country red. Make a lighter value, kind of a pinky color, and we'll go ahead and give him some cheeks, or a cheek, because one of them is behind his wattle. So just dry brush a little pink cheek right next to his beak there, and maybe a little bit over here on the wattle side. And with that pink, we also want to go ahead and dry brush highlighting on the wattle itself, just up the center of the wattle. So I think that's going to do it for the dry brushing with white and red. Dry that brush out really well, because we're going to do some dry brushing with golden straw. And we're going to do that on those green stripes that are on the tail. So through the center of those green stripes, let's do some golden straw. It's not going to show up a whole lot, just enough to make a little difference. All right. We're also going to use this to dry brush some highlighting on this burnt orange base of his tail. Lots of dry brushing on this guy. So you should be getting really good at it, right? We also want to dry brush golden straw on his head, his neck, and his wings. I'm going to go to his neck first because that'll be the easiest. I'm going to go down the center and just flare it out a little bit at the bottom of the neck where it scallops onto his chest. On his head, I'm going to go between his eyes, to the side of his eyes, down here below his little beak. Just wherever there's an open space, you want to dry brush a little bit of golden straw. And let's get his wings. You know, he's looking so much better already just with this little bit of dry brushing. It's amazing. Okay, I think we can go ahead and wash that brush out. Dry it really good because we'll probably use it again real soon. All right, now what I want to do is I want to float some honey brown on the fawn part of his tail feathers. So get out some honey brown, a nice side lobe float. And I'm going to go on either side of the line that separates those feathers from each other. So that's where I'm going first. So I'm going to go one side and then I'll come back and do the other. There's actually quite a bit of floating to do on the tail feathers. And I know floating is your favorite thing to do, right? All right, one side done. Let's go ahead and do the other side. I'm going to turn this guy over just to make it easier and get rid of my hair off of there. It's nice is when you're up against the wing or the face, it's the same color, so you don't have to worry too much about getting into those areas. All right, getting there. So now what I want to do is I want to float up against this yellow tip of the feathers with honey brown. And more than likely we'll come back and refloat some of these areas with a darker color. But for right now, we're just working on honey brown. All right. I got some on his hat, but it'll be okay. I'm not too worried about it. All right, now we can come back and float above and below those green stripes. Told you there was a lot of floating on this. So I'm going to go below first since it's probably drier. Okay, one more below. And let's go ahead and go above. So what's left to do is to float on the tail around this, next to the wings, around this burnt orange part, next to his face, and around the hat, wherever it's on the fawn. Go next to his wings, and then I'm going to start up here. Come around this orange base of his tail feathers. Back up here to around his face. I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. And then I have to go around the hat, wherever it's on top of the fawn. I just felt like that needed to be a little bit darker. We're almost there. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to deepen that shading. Remember I said we'd probably shade again, but I'm only going to deepen the shading where it's behind the tail, behind this orange base, behind his head and his hat, and that's going to be with soft floats of burnt umber. So blend it out. You don't want it to be real dark. And we're just going to go all the way around this guy. It needed that gold behind it, that of honey brown, just to soften it. Otherwise it would be too harsh of a jump between fawn and burnt umber. So that's why we did the honey brown first. And it's because, yeah, I just have to think of things for you to do, right? And what better than to do your favorite thing, which is floating. So just basically setting this, oh, it's going to go behind this wing also. Setting this tail, these tail feathers behind everything that's on top of them. You already know where the floats go, so this should go relatively fast. Right? Yes. I'm going to go jump around here, avoid that hat brim for a minute. Around the hat, I think I need a little bit more color. I got a little too blended out. If you're going to do it, you might as well be able to see it, right? Okay, let's go back and go around this hat brim. And let's get the other side of the hat brim. All right. Now, on this yellow tips of these, I'm just going to take my round brush. I believe this is a 4. And I'm going to take some warm white, and I'm just going to line with my round brush, kind of a dry round brush. I'm just going to line some highlighting through the tips of those feathers where they're white. So don't put any water in your brush. If it's kind of sketchy and dry brushy, that's exactly what you want. Or it's exactly what I want. It may not be what you want. If you want to do a fancier little highlight, that'd be fine with me. It's your piece, right? But I just want to highlight it a little bit and break it up. Luckily, there's not too many that you have to work on. And what I want to do now is I want to float just a touch of burnt orange at where these meet in this point here. So a little bit of burnt orange, blend it out. I'm just going to touch into these little points. And I'm going to do one side, and then I'll come back and do the other, just to brighten it up a little bit. Break it up so it's just not yellow. And you can walk that color up a little ways. All right. And we need to add just a little bit more interest to these feathers. So I'm going to take a piece of drywall joint tape, and I am going to stencil these little circles onto the tail feathers with warm white. They don't have to be lined up like little soldiers. Just want to add some more interest here. So don't scrub too hard. You don't want to leave real bright dots of white. It got real bright, but it'll be okay. That brightens those feathers up quite a bit. Okay. Of course, you need to keep it on the fawn, not on the green so much. All right, I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to wash out my stencil brush. Now what I want to do is I want to take my little liner brush. This is a 10-aught. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the sides of the feathers. I'm going to outline the tops, outline that. We're going to do a lot of lining. And that's all going to be done with thin burnt umber. So I'll probably go through first and line the divisions between the feathers because you want them to stand out just a little bit more. And you can take it right through that green stripe. We're going to do some liner work on the green stripe too. So, but for right now, I'm just going to line those divisions a little bit. Keep the line as thin as you can. That's why I'm going with a 10-aught, because I want to keep it thin. All right, so now I want to line the outside edge and the inside edge of that tip. Just to define it. Didn't have enough paint in my brush. So just slowly but surely outline the tips of these feathers. If you have a brown paint pen or a brown marker, you could do it with that. Last tip. And now what we want to do is we want to line those green stripes, top and bottom. All right, so we have just one more little thing to do to this tail, and all it is I'm going to line some hash marks on these green stripes. And I'm going to do that again with burnt umber. So we just want to thin down some burnt umber and just add some little light hash marks. They don't even have to be complete. They can be kind of sketchy. They can be wiggly. If you had a lot of caffeine, that'll be perfect. But just to add some interest to these stripes, but not too much. And it shouldn't take too long to get these little hash marks in. If you want them to be perfect and all lined up and perfectly spaced, then you go right ahead. I was just looking to break up that green stripe a little bit. All right, let's go to work on this little orange part in the back. Now we've already dry brushed with golden straw. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add some interest to it. So I'm going to use my drywall tape and I'm going to stencil some of those little checks. I'll get a little closer onto that. Also with golden straw. So I think one piece will cover that just about right. And let me find my stencil brush. And we're just going to add a little bit more interest to that with a dry brush of golden straw. And again, it doesn't have to fill up the whole area. Just want to add some interest here. All right, cool. That broke that up really nice. So wash out your stenciling brush. Set it aside. We'll be using it later for the lettering. And on this part, we want to float shading with Heritage Brick. Okay, so a nice side load float. All your floats should be nice side load floats, right? If there's ever an occasion where I want you to do a not nice side load float, I will tell you. So I want to go all the way around. And the scallops. And next to the body and the neck. And this is with Heritage Brick. And I also want to go under his little head. So every side. Not a whole lot of detail on this, because if we did too much detail, then this would turn this into like a 3 or 4 hour class. And that's not what we're going for. Let's go around that wattle. And then down next to his neck and body. All right, let's work on his head and neck. And we've already dry brushed highlighting with golden straw. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to float some shading with burnt umber. And as long as we're doing that, we're going to work on the wings also. But for right now, let's work on that head. So I'm going to go under the hat. And all the way around his head with a float of burnt umber. Kind of rearranged his head there for a minute. It's not good. Okay, let me see. Where's my mop brush? I'm going to soften that a little bit. And let's go to the other side. Got a little dark, but I'll just mop it out and soften it. So I always like to have a mop brush handy. We also want to go around the beak and the wattle, and that includes going over those cheeks. So you want to make sure that your burnt umber is really blended out nicely. This little area right here is basically going to get filled up with burnt umber. So, and again, I'm going to mop that a little bit just to soften it. Now his beak, I'm going to float a highlight across the top of his beak with warm white. Alright, I'm going to float shading in the bottom of the beak, in that pointy area, with burnt orange. And I'm going to actually start pretty high up on the side of the beak and walk that color up. Here again, my handy dandy mop brush is going to soften that. So let's jump on over to his neck, and what I want to do is I want to float burnt umber shading down both sides of his neck and under his chin. Alright, just need to go right under his chin. Now those scallops, what I want to do is I want to just float a highlight on the scallops with golden straw. So I'm going to pop my hairdryer on here real quick and dry those floats on the neck. We're kind of bouncing around a lot, I know. So I'm going to float the scallops. With golden straw. And it goes on kind of bright, but as it dries, it tones down. We want to come back to our face, and we're going to line a shadow above each eye with some thinned burnt umber. So I'm just going to start on one side of the eye on the tip of my liner brush, and as I come around the top of the eye, I flatten, and then I come back up to the tip, and what that does is it sets the eye into his head a little bit. So on the tip, flatten it as you come around the top, and then back up onto the tip. We need to give him some nostrils and some little eyelashes. So again, with my liner brush, I'm just going to pick up some lamp black, and I'm going to squiggle some eyelashes on his eyes. Because turkeys always have beautiful eyelashes, right? And then I'm also going to do just a couple of little dots or set downs for his nostrils. Now I want to deepen the shading in under his chin in these corners a little bit, so I'm just going to come back with another float of burnt umber, and I'm going to darken that just a little bit and kind of round those corners out. Yeah, that looks better. So the wings, what I want to do is I want to float shading in the bottom half and highlight in the top half. I'm going to do the highlight with golden straw. And I'm going to start about halfway down the wing and just float some golden straw in the top half of that wing. Same's going to go for the other side. So I'm going to start probably right on the edge here. And I'm just going to walk that color down and around. Okay, I think I need to brighten this up a little bit. I think I had more water in my brush when I did this side. Yeah, that's better. All right, and I'm going to do the same thing, but with burnt umber in the bottom of each wing. So I'm going to start about halfway up, and I'm just going to float burnt umber in the bottom of this wing. Now the lettering goes on top of this, so I'm not going to worry too much about details here. Again, part way up, and then walk that color around. All right, cool. Let's go to our wattle, and we need to float some shading on our wattle with black plum. In the bottom of the wattle, just like I did the leaves, I'm going to start part way up and come around the bottom. I'm just going to walk that color up the other side. I also want to touch a little bit of this shading where the wattle is kind of stuck behind the beak. Let's dry that really quick, and we can do a little bit of a highlight on that wattle. And the highlight on that wattle is going to be with country red plus warm white. So just a lighter value country red. You don't want it to be too much lighter. You don't want it to kind of jump out at you. So I'm going to go across the top. And I'm also going to come up the side a little bit. And also on this side. So I do realize I forgot to do one thing to these green stripes, and that's to float them with evergreen. So I'm going to get out just a little bit of evergreen. And I'm going to just float some shading on those green stripes on the tail feathers. So first it's going to come down the outside edge, and then it's going to come right in that, what do I want to call that? Well, in the division between the feathers. You're going to do such a better job on this. I know it. All right. And let's do the other side. And there, I caught it before I set my brush down. All right. Oh yeah, that brightened up that tail quite a bit. All right, we're going to get out a new color. We're going to get out some Moody Blue. Not too much. We're going to float some color in the bottom of each eye with Moody Blue. And it's just like a C-stroke float. And I'm going to do it into the bottom of the eye, but I'm not going to do it on the very bottom. I'm going to stay a little bit above the very bottom and leave that little rim of black. Okay? And on this one, it's going to be right. It's not really a C-stroke, it's more flat. So now we just need some highlights in those eyes. And those are done with your liner brush and warm white. And I just did little set downs. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come across diagonally from the set down that's in the black. And I'm going to kind of set down a highlight straddling the blue and the black. All right, and as long as we're there with white, we can add a little highlight in the tops of the nostrils, just a little tiny white. And we want to brighten up this wattle a little bit, so we're going to dry brush a brighter highlight on the wattle with warm white. And that's going to go just up one side, about 2/3 of the way. So just to brighten that up a little bit. Now I'm just going to wipe out my dry brush, because what I want to do is I want to add some texture to this neck area. So I'm going to pick up some golden straw, and this is going to be like a dry brush. I'm just going to take my dry brush and scrub some texture into that neck area. All right, I think that looks great, but then I'm prejudiced. All right, we have to do his little body. Let's dry brush highlighting on his body with fawn, which was the color we based the tail feathers in originally. I'm just going to dry brush and scrub fawn all over this. Again, there's lettering going to be going across here, so we don't need to get too carried away with details. Now I'm also going to pick up a little warm white on my dirty brush and dry brush a little bit brighter highlight. I'm going to keep that mostly on the right side. And as long as we're dry brushing warm white, let's go to these wings and give them a little pop of a brighter highlight on the top side. All right, I'm going to back up a little bit. So there's some shading on his body, of course, and that's going to be done with floats of burnt umber. I'm going to go next to his wings. Going to go under the scallops. next to this wing. And then I'm going to go across the bottom. All right. I think he's looking really good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get our stencil, and we're going to stencil our lettering on with lamp black. So I'm going to get some tape here. You don't want the tape to be too sticky. You don't want to pull up your tissue paper. So lamp black is going to be the color for all of the lettering. Okay, nice and easy. If you wanted to, you could paint the lettering in. If you didn't want to get a stencil. The stencil makes it so much faster. So then I'm going to go down here, and I need to recut my stencil. So, because I messed up that one B. Well, let's get this where we want it. Alrighty. I think that's going to do. Turkeys always say gobble in threes, apparently. Oh, I haven't done his hat. I didn't do his hat. Okay. Hat's quick and easy. Now you won't have to do this with your stencil because it will be right. But I'm skipping that one B that didn't get cut out right. I'm just going to move my stencil over. So I get the right B. All right. So let's let that dry a little bit. Wash out your stencil brush. Now let's work on this hat. So we're going to dry brush highlighting on the top of the hat and on the hat brim with Moody Blue. The hat was based in graphite, so the Moody Blue looks really good on it. And it's going to bring some of that blue into somewhere else on the piece instead of just in the eyes. So don't wash your brush out. Pick up a little warm white so you get a lighter value Moody Blue. And just go through the center of the hat brim and the hat. I'm going to float shading with lamp black. So I'm going to go on either end of the hat brim. I'm going to walk that color across a little bit. Turn this over. Okay. And then I'm also going to go on all four sides of the top. Quick and easy hat. And I need to go here above the hat band and the buckle. Now the hat band, I believe I'm going to paint that with burnt orange. And you could paint it any color on your palette. I'm just going to pick burnt orange because I only have burnt orange in one place right now. Alright, almost got the hat band painted. And the buckle we can paint with golden straw. All right. So while we let the hat band and the buckle dry, let's go back to our letters. And I always like to fill in what I call the bridges on my letters so that they don't look like I stenciled them, so it looks like I painted them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with my liner brush and lamp black and just fill up those bridges. That way people will think I lettered it all. And I just think it looks more finished. Now if you're okay with it looking like it was stenciled, then by all means just leave it be. But I just always like to do this. And it doesn't take all that long. Except this word had a lot of bridges. Like every letter almost. Or it was every letter. Had a bridge except the L. Guess I could have made it have a bridge so it wouldn't feel left out. This one will go a little faster because it's smaller. Okay, one more word. Right. So we need to do some dry brushing on our hat band. We're going to do that with golden straw. I'm just going to scrub a little bit of golden straw through the center of the hat band. And then I'm going to pick up some warm white on that dirty brush. And I'm going to dry brush some highlighting through the center of each side of that buckle. The hat band, I'm going to float shading with Heritage Brick. That's going to go both outer edges and inside the buckle. Next to the buckle, and again on the inside of the buckle. Now if you wanted to add some stripes or something to that, you could. It's your piece. The buckle, I'm going to float some shading with burnt umber, our shading color of choice for this piece. So I'm going to go on the bottom of the buckle where it tucks behind the hat brim, and I'm going to go across the top. All right, it's looking pretty good. Now, of course, the lettering, we're going to do our thin down some burnt umber and line a shadow to the top and left side of each letter, just to make it pop off the background a little bit more. So here's the top and the left side and the left side of the inside. And look at how that does that. So nice. So just every single letter. Just a thin, nice thin burnt umber in your liner brush. That just helps to pop that lettering off the background a little bit. Cool. Almost done, my friends. Just all these other letters to do. And I'll probably fast forward through this, since I think you get the gist of what I'm doing. So I'm going to do my usual kind of rough edge around this guy, and that's going to be done with lamp black also. And the way I do that is I just kind of corner load a flat brush with lamp black, and then the side that's loaded I just start painting and squiggling the color there. Just to add some interest to the border. I think it makes the colors in the center kind of pop. So just all the way around. Just a quick little squiggly border. Doesn't take too long, unless you want it to take a long time. It can take as long as you want. Coming into the home stretch here. All right. Awesome. So I do feel like these letters need something, just another little something something to brighten them up a little bit. So I'm going to take my round brush and some Moody Blue, mix a little warm white with it. I want a little bit lighter color. Now I'm wiping it out. I don't want it to be, I want it to be more of a dry thing. Dry brush, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to line a little bit of a highlight inside the top of each of those letters. And see how it's kind of dry brushed? Doesn't take very much, just to brighten those up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to go down and finish the other ones, and then I believe we can call this thing done. As always, if you want to do more, if you want to add more details or less details, the piece is yours. Just do what you'd like. All right. I think that helped make them stand out a little bit more. So let's back off and say hello to your turkey for Thanksgiving. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you'll join me again next month when we go back to a Halloween piece. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Surface and supplies for this piece are always available on the Just Fine Designs website.